On January 26, 2025, a research boat off the coast of Tenerife was heading back to port. They had spent the day looking for sharks. About a mile from shore, a biologist named Seadevil saw something black in the water, right at the surface, in full daylight. It was 7 inches long. It had a mouth that didn't close, and it was swimming straight up. Every scientist who saw that footage said the same thing. This is not possible. One of them, a fish biologist at Rice University, has said his first honest reaction was that the video had to be fake, that somebody had generated it on a computer. It wasn't fake. What they were filming was a black Seadevil, an animal that lives between 600 and 6,000 feet down, in water that sunlight has never reached. In more than 100 years of deep-sea research, nobody had ever recorded an adult one alive at the surface. She stayed alive for a few more hours. Then she died. And within 72 hours, the internet had decided why she came up. The story went around the world. She swam up to see the sun, a creature born in permanent darkness at the end of her life, making one last impossible climb toward the light. There were paintings. There were poems. There was a video of a woman sobbing about a fish that pulled 5 million views in a weekend. It is a beautiful story. It is almost certainly not what happened. Because the explanations that deep-sea biologists actually put on the table are stranger than the poem. And every one of them depends on something about this animal that most of the people crying over that video had no idea was true. The light on her head was not being made by her. The male of her kind does not hunt, does not eat, and in some anglerfish does not remain a separate animal at all. And to make that possible, her entire lineage deleted a piece of the immune system that biologists used to think no vertebrate could survive without. She was not a monster taking one last look at the sun. She was the endpoint of the strangest evolutionary experiment in the ocean. And most of what we know about it, we only learned in the last 6 years. Her name is Melanocytus johnsonii, the black Seadevil. Here's the first thing that footage does not tell you. Hold your hand out flat. She was about that long. Females of her species top out around 7 inches, 18 centimeters. Those jaws, the ones that look like they belong to something the size of a car, would sit in your palm. That mismatch is the whole design. In the midnight zone, food does not arrive on a schedule. It barely arrives at all. So the black Seadevil is built as a stomach with teeth attached, a body that can swallow prey close to its own size, because the next meal might be weeks away, or might never come. And it is built to do nothing. An anglerfish is an ambush predator in the most literal sense. It hangs in open water, barely moving, burning as little energy as an animal can burn and still be alive. The biologists who work on these fish will tell you flatly, not moving is the strategy. Which is exactly why that video broke them. The animal off Tenerife was not drifting. It was swimming, upward, deliberately, in daylight, through water more than 10 degrees warmer than anything its body was designed for. That is not an anglerfish behaving unusually. That is an anglerfish doing something it has no equipment for. And the part of her that made her famous, the light, was not hers either. The lure has a name. The rod on her forehead is the Elysium, a modified spine of the dorsal fin, the same fin that runs down the back of an ordinary fish, relocated forward over the mouth. The bulb at the end is the esca. The esca does not glow. It houses something that does. Inside that bulb is a colony of bacteria, not her cells. A separate organism, living in a pocket in her head, producing a faint blue-green light on her behalf. In exchange, she feeds them. For decades, nobody could identify them, because these bacteria will not grow in a laboratory, not with difficulty, at all. It took genome sequencing to finally put names on them. The black Seadevil carries a species called Vibrio escacola, a different anglerfish. The triple-wart Seadevil carries a different one entirely. And when a team at Cornell read those genomes in 2018, they found something that changes how you look at that lure. The bacteria inside an anglerfish esca have lost roughly half their genome compared to their free-living relatives. Most of the genes for building their own amino acids, gone. Most of the ability to process anything but glucose, gone. These are organisms stripped down until they can barely function outside a host. But they kept one thing. They kept the full set of genes for building a flagellum, a tail, for swimming. Which raises the obvious question, and follow-up work went straight at it. If the bacteria are that dependent, how do they get into the fish at all? A newborn anglerfish should inherit them from its mother. It doesn't. The larvae hatch with no light. The bacteria are picked up later, out of the open ocean, from a population of stripped-down cells drifting in cold black water, waiting. So the most famous light in the deep sea is not a lamp she grew. It is a lamp she found. That is the part of anglerfish biology that makes it into nature documentaries. Here's the part that usually doesn't. Everything I have described so far, the lure, the bacteria, the jaws, the light, belongs to the female. All of it. Male anglerfish have no lure. They never grow one. In 1920, an Icelandic fisheries biologist pulled up a female anglerfish and noticed two small growths hanging off her belly. He assumed they were her young. They were not. They were adult males of her own species, attached to her body. That was 106 years ago. It took most of the century that followed to work out what was actually happening. A male serratioid anglerfish is not a smaller version of the female. He is a different animal. He hatches with enormous nostrils, enormous eyes, and in many species, a digestive system that never fully develops. He cannot hunt. He has no lure to hunt with. What he has is a nose tuned to one chemical signal in a body of water the size of an ocean basin, and a very short window to find it. If he finds her, he bites. In some species, that is the end of it. He attaches, he fertilizes, he lets go. In others, the bite is permanent. His mouth fuses to her skin. The tissues merge. Their blood vessels connect. From that moment, he never eats again, because he no longer has to. Her circulatory system feeds him. His eyes degenerate. His fins degenerate. Most of his body degenerates. What is left, functionally, is a pair of testes attached to a female, drawing nutrients out of her blood for as long as she lives. And in one species, it goes further than anywhere else in the vertebrate world. Photocorinus spinoceps. The female is about the length of your thumb. The mature male fused to her back measures 6.2 millimeters, a quarter of an inch. He is, by length, the smallest sexually mature vertebrate ever recorded, and the researcher who described him had first taken him for a small bump on her spine. Some females carry more than one. They end up with a permanent, fused population of mates riding on their body, alive, sharing their blood. Which brings up a problem that took a century to solve. because what I just described should be impossible. When a human receives a transplanted organ, the body attacks it. That is the default setting. Your immune system's job is to recognize foreign tissue and destroy it, and it is extremely good at it. Good enough that all of transplant medicine is built around suppressing it. Matching donors. Drugs for life. Two anglerfish fusing their tissues and sharing a bloodstream is a transplant with no surgeon and no drugs. It should end the way every unmatched graft ends. In 2020, a team led by the Max Planck Institute in Germany, working with the University of Washington, sequenced anglerfish genomes to find out why it doesn't. What they found was not a clever workaround. It was deletion. In species where males attach temporarily, a gene called ICDI is missing. The gene that lets antibodies sharpen themselves against a specific target. In species where males fuse permanently, more is gone. And at the far end, in species where a single female carries several fused males, the researchers found the functional RAG genes had been lost outright. That is not a minor edit. The RAG genes are what allow a vertebrate to build the enormous library of antigen receptors that adaptive immunity runs on. Losing them means losing the whole system. No antibody diversity. No targeted recognition of a specific pathogen. This is the branch of immunity that every textbook describes as fundamental to being a vertebrate. These fish threw it away. And they are still here. Living in a deep sea that is full of bacteria. Still catching prey. Still reproducing. Running on innate immunity. And almost certainly on some alternative defense that nobody has identified yet. That is not a settled chapter. That is an open question in a live field, right now. And it is being taken seriously well outside marine biology. The Yale researcher who led a later study on anglerfish evolution has pointed out that working out how these animals dropped adaptive immunity without dying could eventually matter for human medicine, for transplants, for skin grafts, for every procedure where holding back rejection is the difference between working and failing. So how does an animal end up like this? Two separate research teams answered that in 2024, and the answer reframes the entire group. Deep-sea anglerfish did not begin in the deep sea. They began on the bottom, as walkers. Their ancestors were seafloor fish that used modified pelvic fins to move across sediment, the way frogfish still do today. That lineage was benthic, shallow, and unremarkable. Then it let go. A Yale-led team rebuilding the family tree found that somewhere between 50 and 35 million years ago, during a period of extreme global warming called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, the ancestors of these fish left the floor entirely and moved into open water, the midnight zone. Thousands of feet of nothing in every direction. No bottom, no light, no structure of any kind. It is the move whales made. Run backwards. Whales left the land for the water. Anglerfish left the seafloor for the water column. And once they were out there, they exploded. More than 200 species, radiating so fast that the researchers could not cleanly resolve the order of the branching. The lineages split too quickly to leave a readable signal in the genome. A second study, published months later, added the anatomy. As they moved off the bottom, the jaws got bigger, the eyes got smaller. The body shapes got stranger and far more varied than anything in their shallow water relatives. The conclusion both teams land on is that no single trait did this. The dwarf males, the sexual parasitism, the collapsed immune system, the borrowed light. They arrived together, and together they made an empty, food-poor, lightless volume of ocean survivable. Not comfortable, survivable. Which brings us back to a boat off Tenerife, and a fish where a fish should not be. Here are the explanations the scientists actually offered. She may have swallowed something with a gas-filled swim bladder and been dragged upward by her own meal as it expanded. She may have been caught in a rising column of warm water from volcanic activity on the seafloor below the Canaries. She may have been eaten by something larger, carried up inside it, and spat out alive near the surface. Or she may simply have been sick or injured and lost the ability to hold her depth. Notice what none of those contain: intention. In every version, she is not climbing. She is being taken. And there is a detail in that footage that makes the beautiful version harder to hold on to. She was swimming vertically, actively, in daylight, behavior her body has no capacity to sustain. What the specialists see there is not a journey. It is an animal in the wrong pressure, the wrong temperature and the wrong light, doing the last thing its nervous system knows how to do. The team that filmed her has said something about all of it worth keeping. The scientist who shot the video pushed back on the humanizing and said what actually mattered was this: a fish nobody had ever seen alive up there had just made millions of people curious about the ocean for the first time in their lives. That is the real ending. The first confirmed sighting in history of an adult black Seadevil alive at the surface. And the only reason we have it is that she happened to come up in front of the one boat on the one afternoon that had a camera pointed the right way. There are more than 200 species of deep-sea anglerfish. Nearly every one of them was described from dead animals hauled up in nets. We have filmed a handful alive. We have never once watched one use its lure and take prey in the wild. We have never watched a male find a female in open water. The most famous predator in the deep ocean, and the center of its life is still something we have reasoned out rather than seen. She surfaced by accident. Everything else down there is still where it has always been. Subscribe, and we keep going down.